Good. How is everybody this morning? Good? Excellent. You're here. That's already a good start, I hope. By the way, I said I'd say this at the start. Monique needs your help. She's usually reminding me that I have to take my sunnies off when I come up to preach. So if you'll ever see me up here with them still on, tell me to take them off. She's trying to train me, but we'll see how we go. She needs your help, trust me. Takes a village to raise a preacher. Something like that. Well, welcome if you're visiting us. Welcome if you're not visiting us and you're just a regular. That's cool. It's always good to see you guys. So last week, Brendan looked at and preached on the devil's plans and the fact that they haven't changed. Right from the beginning of time, when he tricked Eve, right through to Jesus, and still today, his plans haven't changed. His goal is still to get us to worship anything or anyone that isn't God. And if he can put us off that, if he can pull that off, he's won. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's not God. And he does it by testing the security and significance that we find in God. And he will do anything that he can to undermine that. Now, the temptation that he brings, that is inevitable. And often it's going to be at times which are least opportune for us. If you were trying to plan an attack on a warrior to take him out, the best time isn't necessarily in the field of battle. Because that's the point where they're all kitted out with their armor, they've psyched themselves up, and they're ready to go. They've braced themselves for the battle. It's probably the worst time to try and take them down. But the best time is when they've got no armor on, no weapons at the ready, and when their focus is on something else completely. Could be celebrating, could be mourning. And we see that's when he struck at Jesus. That's when Satan tried to get at Jesus. First time, after he'd been wandering through the wilderness when he was starving and exhausted. And then again in the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus was so in distress, knowing the pain and suffering that was actually awaiting him, that he was about to go through. Those were the two key times that Satan struck at Jesus. Thankfully for us, Jesus didn't give in to him. But man, that would have been tough. For myself, I know probably the majority of the times when I've given in way too easily to temptation, to doing something or looking at what I know I shouldn't, it's usually been after church on Sundays. Most of the time after preaching. But it won't be when we're expecting it. It won't be the times when we are most ready that Satan's going to attack. It's going to be when we're not ready for it. That's why the Bible says, always be on guard. So this morning, we're going to follow on from that, and we're looking at a guy named Job. So if you've got your Bibles, go to Job chapter 9. It will be on the screen as well. Now, Job is a big book. There's a lot of lessons to learn from it. And honestly, I think it's been read by a numberless amount of people because we can identify with Job. Now, if you don't know the story, Job was a super solid believer and follower of God. He had a lot of wealth, he had a big family, and he was looked on with favor by all the people around him as well. And he still remained humble, he still remained close to God, and he still remained serving him, no matter how much success he had. And God gave Satan permission to test him. So first of all, Satan killed all of Job's family and his household, all the servants and everything, and took away everything that he had. Property, his animals, everything. The goal was to get Job to curse God, to turn his back on him. But he didn't. He still held God up and went, you know what? God gave it all to me and he can take it away as well. Who am I to question that? It's a pretty good response. But Job didn't crack, and so Satan was able to go again. And this time he wasn't allowed to kill him, but he inflicted Job with sores all over his body from head to toe. I can't imagine what that would be like. But he's literally done everything to Job except for kill him. That's the start of Job's story that we read. Then the majority of the rest of the book is him going back and forth with his three friends. And another guy who shows up as well. But he's going back and forth, and the discussion goes along the lines of the fact that they are saying, well, you wouldn't be in this situation unless you'd done something wrong. So God must be punishing you for something. And Job defends himself, saying, I haven't done anything that I can think of. I haven't given God any reason to punish me. And his friends come back and go, well, God is just. God is always right. So you must have done something. And Job maintains his innocence. And he wishes that he could actually plead his case to God like he was in a courtroom. And ask him, why are you putting me through this? Why is this crisis happening in my life? Because I haven't done anything to you. And so many questions come up for Job as he goes through this. And they're the same questions that we ask too, especially when we're in a crisis. Whether we believe in God or not, we ask those questions. What's the reason for this happening? God, have you created things and then just left us alone to our own devices to try and figure this out? Is God doing this for fun? Is he too powerless to do anything about it, even if he does care? Or, God, if you're there, do you even care about what I'm going through right now? Those are the questions that come up for Job, and they do for us as well, in one way or another. So let's have a look at what Job says, what he knows, how he thinks about God, and what that should be pointing us to, what that is pointing us to. So if we go into Job chapter 9, verses 2 and 3. So then Job replied, indeed, I know that this is true. But how can mere mortals prove their innocence before God? Though they wished to dispute with him, they could not answer him one time out of 1,000. So his friend Bildad, love that name, has just finished reminding Job that God is just. He punishes the wicked, not the innocent. And that if Job is in fact innocent, then God will turn this all around. Job, you got nothing to worry about. If you're innocent, God will sort it out. Just leave it and get over it. Job agrees that God is just. But then he asks the question, how can I prove my innocence before God then? Another way is, how can we find God's approval? How can we be considered righteous and not guilty before God? And Job's question comes from his heart of, even after everything that I've done to serve and follow God, if that doesn't meet his approval, then what will? What does? What can? Have you ever been connected with someone where nothing you did was ever good enough? I'm seeing some nods. It's a rubbish feeling, hey? You put your heart and soul and all your time and energy into doing stuff for someone, and they're still disappointed in you, or it's still not good enough. And you're left just thinking, I don't know what else to do then. I've got nothing else to give. And that's part of how Job is feeling. I've done all this, and yet if that isn't good enough for God, then I don't know what is. How can I meet his approval? How can I be innocent before him then? But the fact of the matter also is that when we stand before God and get compared to his standard, we don't measure up. And we're not innocent. In Luke chapter 18, when Jesus was asked, what do I have to do to heaven? And the person called him a good teacher. And he said, no one is good except God alone. In Romans chapter 3, Paul says, there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned away. They have together become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one. So Job knew that in and of himself, he actually had no answer to God anyway. He knew he needed to and wanted to meet God's standard. But he knew that from this, there was nothing in himself, based on himself, that he could do to do that. Nothing we will ever have or do or be that is based solely on us will actually measure up to God's standard. It's a fact of being human. If God asks us why he should let us into heaven, there is no response simply based on us that we can give that'll actually get us in. But the hope, there is hope at the end of this, by the way. I won't leave you in distress. But we need to get the reality of the situation first, that we haven't got it ourselves. And knowing that need, understanding and accepting that reality is the first part of what we need to be able to do. Then on to verse 4. Job then starts looking at God and who he is. His wisdom is profound, his power is vast. Who has resisted him and come out unscathed? Plenty have resisted God. Lots still do, and many more still will. But where does that lead? Remember that Satan's goal is to get us to resist God for literally anything else. And as long as it's not God, he wins. And that's the whole point of why Job is in this crisis that he's in anyway. Because Satan is trying to get him to turn from God. Sometimes resisting God will bring some temporary fun or fortune. It probably could. But it doesn't last. Trying life my way instead of God's actually leads me into a downward spiral, which eventually just keeps going down and down. Maybe it has already happened that way for you, or maybe it will happen that way for you at some stage. And I want you to know you have support and safety here if and when that's happening to you. You do. Whatever that looks like, whatever the things are that you end up doing or saying or thinking or feeling, you are safe here to be able to come back up from that. But you need to know the end result as well, if that downward spiral isn't stopped. And Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, "Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the way that leads to life. Only a few find it. It's not a good ending when we actually don't know Jesus. It could be fun for a little while, but eventually that stops. Eventually we find ourselves face to face with God. I don't know whether he's going to ask this or not, but if he was going to ask you the question, why should I now let you into heaven? There wouldn't be an answer good enough. But we're going to get to that answer. So in the next five or six verses, Job then keeps focusing on God and who he is. So verse 5 and 6, he moves mountains without their knowing it, and he overturns them in his anger. He shakes the earth from its place and makes its pillars tremble. God has power over the earth and everything on it. Mountains, he can move those. He can shake the earth to its core. He created it. That's who he is. In verse 7, he speaks to the sun and it does not shine. He seals off the light of the stars. The sun, moon, and stars, God has control over those because he created them too. Now what comes with those? You've got time, our days and nights, months, years. He can control that. Our seasons, when things grow, when things don't, when it gets hot and cold, he can control that. Verse 8 and 9, he alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. He is the maker of the bear and Orion. I'm going to say that's the Pleiades, because that'll do. And the constellations of the south. The universe, the galaxies, what we've discovered and what we haven't, further than we can see or imagine. He's got control over all of that. He created it all. He is bigger than all of it. Verse 10, he performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. Things that can only be explained by the existence of God, by the presence of God, and by his interaction with us and the world and the universe as his creation. That's who our God is. He is big and mighty and over everything. This is Job going back over through who he knows God to be and how big and mighty and powerful he is. Do you think he's feeling comforted by this in the middle of his crisis? I don't think so. Some say yes, some say no. I don't think so. Because in the middle of this, Job is starting to feel like God is too far away. That he's not there with him. That he's too far away to care. I wonder, have you ever felt like that before? Like God might have everything else under control, but he can't see you. Maybe you're feeling it right now, and you've come here today trying to sort that out or figure that out. Like there's a gap between you and God, and he's just too distant to care to sort your life out, or to even be in it. With the young people that we work with, the most important thing that has been drummed into us, when they're in the middle of their crisis moments, the most important thing is to be able to hold that space with them so that they know that they are not alone in it. That no matter what they do, we are still there with them and for them, caring for them. Man, we all need to feel like someone is there to care for us. Especially in the middle of a crisis like Job is going through. His three friends started off that way, but then they started trying to problem solve him and go, well, this must be what's wrong, so this is what you got to do. And that wasn't helpful for him. But you know what? It's a real feeling to feel like there's a gap between you and God. It's a real feeling to feel like he is far away. It doesn't make you a bad Christian for feeling that. But that's only half the picture. Like I said, I'm not going to leave you here without any hope, because we have it. And Job knew himself what the need was, as we're going to see. So we're going to jump now down to verse 32. Still in Job chapter 9, but now down to verse 32. Now he's again reflecting on who God is, and he says, "He is not a mere mortal like me, that I might answer him, that we might confront each other in court." Job knew himself, and he knew God, and he knew that he couldn't just square up to him like, "Dude, what's going on? Why are you letting this happen to me?" He couldn't confront him as an equal, because he's not an equal with God. None of us are. He is God. He is our creator. We can't measure up face to face with him. Even the times in the Bible where God says, "I'm going to show myself to you," he had to, he could only show Moses the back of himself. And that made Moses' face glow for who knows how long. We are not at his level of power or authority or quality. So that's the problem that Job is facing. He believes he's innocent and that he shouldn't be in this crisis. He knows that God is powerful enough to fix it, but hasn't for some unknown reason. And Job would like to know what's going on here. God, why is this happening? But he can't just start pointing the finger at God and accusing him like he's in court. But he also doesn't know what else to do. That's his dilemma. And then he says this, verses 33 and 34. If only there were, he mentions three things. If only there was someone to mediate between us. If only there was someone to stand in the gap, because I can't measure up to God face to face, so I need someone to be able to do that on my behalf. He says, if only there was someone to bring us together. Someone to bridge that gap, so I don't think God is too far away to actually bring us together. Because that's a gap. He's too distant from me, but I can't jump that far. So I need someone to bring us together. If only there was someone to remove God's rod from me. If only there was someone who could help take this away. Or at least help me understand what's going on so I can have peace in this moment. So I can know that I'm still secure and safe with God. That I still mean something to him. There is hope in this, because everything that Job is feeling and needing and crying out for is actually pointing us to Jesus. And Job wasn't prophesying about Jesus, but his heart cry shows that he is feeling the need for him. The same as what we all need at some point in our lives. The same need that we all recognize at some point in our lives. But sometimes it takes a crisis to get us to that. We don't necessarily feel our need for Jesus when things are hunky-dory and they're going good. We still need him then, but we don't always feel that need. Sometimes God's actually got to bring us right down to rock bottom when we have no answers. And that's when we turn and go, you know what, there is something I need and I can't meet that need for myself. See, Job is now looking outside of himself for an answer. Now, sometimes we don't always know the name to meet that need that we feel. But I'm telling you right now, that name is Jesus. We are Job. We need someone to mediate between us and God because we can't measure up to him. We need someone to bring us together with God because we can't bridge that gap ourselves. We need someone to remove God's rod from us, someone to actually take on the debt that we can't pay ourselves. Because there is a debt that has to be paid for us to get into heaven, for us to live with God forever. And we can't pay that. The debt is an eternity in hell that we would have to go through to pay for that. And that's not something that we can do. See, in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of a painful experience, when God feels far away, Jesus gets that. He understands. He'd lived that. When Jesus was getting crucified up on the cross, it says, at 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me? If that's not God feeling far away to someone in the middle of something, I don't know what is. So, does God care? That's the question Job was ultimately wrestling with. And yes, he does. See, Jesus is the proof of that. Because Jesus shows us that not only does God exist, but that he actually interacts with us. He wants to know us and he wants to bring us to him. It shows us that he does care. Because he actually became the way for us to be with him. He actually became the way for us to be forgiven. There is no other religion or worldview or way of life on earth that will actually show God coming down and making that way to himself. Everything else always says, do better. You've got to lift yourself up. As God said, you can't do that. It won't work. I'll come down to you. We got Christmas coming up in a bit over a month. And that's kind of that is exactly what we celebrate there. God sending Jesus, his only son, as a baby to live like a person, to die on the cross. That's the whole point of it. And it means that any crisis, any painful experience actually has some meaning to it. There is hope in it. Because every crisis is an opportunity for growth. But it's not an opportunity that is there without Jesus. Now, I'd encourage you to go through and kind of read at least like the start and end of Job as well to get the whole picture. He starts off as a humble servant of God, humbly submitting to him. Then he goes through this whole process of questioning and even challenging God on some things, going, what is this? What is happening? What are you doing? And he ends up with a greater faith because of it. And he ends up actually having a one-on-one with God. Freaked him out at the time, but he got that one-on-one with God, which wouldn't have happened if he hasn't gone through this crisis. When something is happening, we don't have to give up. we don't have to despair because God is in it with us. One of the names for Jesus was Emmanuel, God with us. But it does mean that you have to know Jesus for this to be the case. And we can get the band to come back up and we'll finish with our last song. But I want to put this out there for you that there is hope. Something can be painful, something can be tough. There is hope, but you're not going to find it in anything or anyone except for Jesus. So if you don't know him, then you need to. If you don't know him today, come and have a chat. Let's help get that sorted. Because you don't have to go through with no hope. You don't have to. So I pray, choose Jesus. Choose to have that hope no matter what is going on. God, we are so blessed to be here and able to follow you. We don't deserve it. We can't make it happen. But we are so grateful that you have made a way for that to happen. God, if we need to have hope in you for the first time in our lives, give us the courage to do that. Give us the courage to want to know you through Jesus. If we are currently going through something in the middle of a crisis, in the middle of pain, God, help us to look at Jesus. Let him be our picture and vision of you and the reminder that you care and that you are with us in this. That there is hope. Lord, for those of us who are in a good spot right now, help us to show your care to each other. That we don't need to remind people that you're big and mighty and powerful, but that you sent Jesus. And to act in a way towards each other that shows that love and care. In Jesus' name, amen.